Hello everyone. Today we will be doing verses 62 to 71. This is section 8. Let us begin. Those who believe in the Quran and those who follow the Jewish scriptures and the Christians and the Sabians and who believe in God and the last day and work righteousness shall have the reward with the Lord. On them shall be no fear, nor shall they grieve. This is verse 62, Surah Baqarah, the Surah of the cow. Now when I read this verse, it makes me ponder and to think what God is saying. God is speaking about the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians. And God is also speaking about the Sabians. Now we know who the Muslims are, we know who the Jews are, we know who the Christians are. The Sabians were a group of people that lived in the Arab Peninsula. And these people were pious people, humble people, people with good character. And God has included them in people of the book. So what God is saying to us in this verse is that if you live according to how God wants you to live, with humbleness, with piety, and believing in God and God alone, because God is speaking about all religions now. God is speaking, well, not all, but many religions. God is speaking about all the major religions now. The Christians, the Jews, the Muslims, and God has added the Sabians. So under the category of Sabians, there can be many people, many people can be under that category. We don't know who they are. God alone knows who they are. And with this, all God wants us is to worship Him. And God has no favorite. God does not speak about any favorites. God's favorite is those that worship Him, and worship Him in a manner that He is to be worshipped, believing in all His prophets, not believing that prophets are God, believing that there's only one God, He is God, and all the prophets that came, prophets Moses, prophets Jesus, prophet Muhammad, all these prophets that came were prophets of God. They were not God. Nowhere in this book do God say Jesus is God. Nowhere in this book do God say Muhammad is God. Nowhere in this last testament do God say Moses is God. God is God, and He created everybody. And the prophets that God has chosen, they came down to lead us, to teach us how to worship God. So in this one verse, we can derive many things from this verse. But we just derive a little bit so that we get a bit of understanding and we move on. Otherwise, we're never going to complete this last testament. And we go to verse 63. And remember, we took your covenant, and we raised above you the towering height of Mount Sinai, saying, hold firmly to what we have given you, and bring ever to remembrance what is therein, perchance he may fear God. Now, the Jews at that point in time, all God wanted was to hold a covenant, meaning they must worship God. But they broke the covenant over and over. And at this point in time, they were standing near to where Mount Sinai is. Now, Mount Sinai is the same mountain where Moses got the 10 Commandments. Where God called Moses, and he came and he was given the 10 Commandments. Now, they were standing at this mountain. And then it appeared to them that in a shadow, what they saw is that the whole mountain was lifted high above their heads. And at any time, God could just drop it and He would crush all of them. And there were some Jews that actually said, the Lord has spoken, we must obey. Because they got fear, they were scared. Now if you listen to this also, when the Jews were in Egypt under the rule of Pharaoh, before Pharaoh allowed the Israelites to go with Moses, God had to put him through so many tests because he refused to. The rivers were flowing with blood. God has caused that. There were storms of locusts that came. Every time something happened, and then he says, yes, he's going to let them go. But when that time has passed, and then he changes his word. And same with the Jews. Because they were under Pharaoh's rule for so long, they have inherited his ways. And they behave in the same manner. So God has brought them out of slavery, and they still remain in the same manner, or behave in the same manner. So let's go to verse 64. But he turned back thereafter, and had it not been for the grace and mercy of God to you, you surely would have been among the lost. That's verse 64. So what God is saying, that if it hasn't been for the mercy of God and the grace of God, they would be at a lost. God would drop that entire mountain on top of them, but God did not do that. Verse 65. And while he knew those amongst you who transgressed in the matter of the Sabbath, we said to them, be apes, despised and rejected. Now, the Sabbath day is the day of worship, the day of rest. And on this particular day, the Jews were not supposed to fish. In fact, these Jews that God is speaking about now were fishermen, because they lived near the coast, and that was their livelihood, was catching fish. Now on the Sabbath day, they were not supposed to do this. On the Sabbath day is for prayer, for worshipping God, and for rest. It is even said that the women must not cook on that day. So on this particular day, they were supposed to rest. But now, the days before the Sabbath day, they couldn't catch any fish. They caught few fish, but they weren't plentiful. But what happened on the Sabbath day? The fish came out plenty, and what the Jews did, they left out their nets. And nighttime came, and then what they did was, they went to go catch the fish, thinking that this would be okay. But this made God so angry. And at this point in time, it made God so angry because they're breaking the law. They're breaking the law of the Sabbath day. So what God has done is, at this point in time, those people, not all of them, only those people that when you go catch the fish the night time and bring the fish in, God said to them, be apes, despised and rejected. And with this, what God has done is, only those people that when you go catch the fish, God has turned them into apes. So their bodies were still, the entire body was of an ape, but their senses and everything was still of human nature. However, they are not the same apes that you see in today's time now. They lived for about 3 years. The apes that you see of today's time, remember Noah and the ark, when God said them bring the animals on 2 by 2, male and female. God didn't say male and male, female and female. God said male and female, because God is saying male and male, female and female, there'd be no animals left. There'd be no animals walking around. So yes, so it's male and female of each type of animals. God speaks about this, and God says to them, this was the animal that went onto Noah's ark. So the apes of today's time is the apes that were on Noah's ark, not these Jews that God turned into apes. They only lived for about 3 years, and they died. So we made an example to their own time and to the posterity, and a lesson to those who fear God. So that is verse 66. So verse 66, okay, so verse 66, so what God is speaking about here in verse 66 is just saying that the example He made of the Jews at that point in time, turning them into apes. So that's just an example, so that we who read this Last Testament know what happened back then, and we understand the verses that we read, because we cannot just read these verses without doing a bit of research, because you will not get the full meaning of what the verse is telling you, and you will not understand what happened at that point in time. So that was verse 66. Verse 77. And remember, Moses said to his people, God commands that he sacrifice a heifer. They said, Makest thou a laughing stock of us? He said, God save me from being an ignorant fool. Okay, God has said to Moses to go tell the Jews now they must sacrifice a cow. And obviously they're not happy to sacrifice the cow. So let's read here what they're saying. They're asking Moses, are you making a laughing stock of us? And Moses is saying to God that to save him, Moses is saying to God to save him from being an ignorant fool. That is verse 67. So these verses are very straightforward, so there's no need to do research on these verses. That was 67, 68. They said, Beseech on our behalf thy Lord to make plain to us what heifer it is. Moses said, He says the heifer should be neither too old nor too young, but of middling age. Now do what ye are commanded. Then they said, Beseech on our behalf thy Lord to make plain to us her color. Moses says, he says, a fawn-colored heifer, pure and rich in tone, the admiration of beholders. So what they're doing is they're questioning Moses, and they're sending Moses back and forth because they don't want to sacrifice the cow. They said, Beseech on our behalf thy Lord to make plain to us what she is to us. What she is to us are all heifers alike. We wish indeed for guidance if God wills. So in verse 71, Moses says, Moses said, God says, a heifer not trained to till the soil or to water the fields, sound and without blemish. So the Jews after this has said now, the Jews said, now hast thou brought the truth. Then they offered her in sacrifice, but not with good will. So what we understand is that they were asked to sacrifice the cow. They didn't want to. They sent Moses up and down, refusing, and every time asking questions, every time saying this, every time saying that. And in the end, they agreed to sacrifice the cow. In the next verse, in the next chapter, what we have just completed was chapter 8. In chapter 9, we'll see why they had to slaughter the cow. What the reasoning came behind why they had to slaughter the cow. So we've done now verses 62 to 71. This is section 8. And I leave you with that. And why am I doing this? Because I love you. Bye-bye.